My name is Melissa Hafaf. I'm the Executive Director for the Gender Justice Initiative here at Georgetown. We are a cross-campus effort that nurtures and supports research, as well as programs related to anything intersectional gender justice, and we work with the Law Center. Over there, I do that because it's over there by the Capitol main campus and the Medical Center. And today I'm very happy to collaborate also with other partners at Georgetown and outside of Georgetown to present this program. And I'd like to thank the Women's and Gender Studies program, the African American Studies Department, Black Women Radicals, and French in Motion for supporting this event with us. Our program will consist of two parts. So first we'll watch a documentary, which is about 40 minutes. And then we will have a conversation between the director, Rokhaya Diallo, and our own professor, Dr. Kwame Edwin Otu, who will be asking a few questions to Rokhaya to start off the conversation, and then we will open it to the audience to ask anything that you'd like to find out about. Thank you, and enjoy. Now I will introduce our speakers. If you don't know who Rokhaya Diallo is, she's an award-winning journalist, filmmaker, author, and she's internationally recognized for her very courageous work as an anti-racist and intersectional feminist advocate in France and beyond. She's published numerous articles, a dozen of books, including graphic novels. She directed over 8 documentaries, hosts various TV, radio shows, podcasts, and she writes a monthly column for the Washington Post that I encourage you to check out, that focuses on gender and race in France. And Rokhaya has also joined Georgetown Gender Justice Initiative as our inaugural researcher in residence for 21-24, so we're very excited to have her, and so this is not the last time you will see her here. And then the moderator for this conversation is our own Georgetown professor, Dr. Kwame Edwin Otu, who's joined us this semester, and he's a professor in African Studies. Dr. Otu is a cultural anthropologist with varied interests, ranging from the politics of sexual, environmental, technological citizenships, public health, and their intersections with shifting racial formations in neo-colonial and neoliberal Africa and the African diaspora. Otu's first book actually just came out in July 2022. It's published with the University of California Press, and we hope to soon have a book talk to learn about this amazing book that is called Amphibious Subject, Sasso and the Contested Politics of Queer Self-Making in Neoliberal Ghana. And this book is an ethnography of queer self-fashioning among a community of self-identified effeminate men, known in local parlance as Sasso. Thank you for being here. Thank you for accepting our invitation. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to have you here, and thank you for watching the film.
Thank you for being here with us, and thank you so much, Professor Hafaf, and really we appreciate the fact that the Gender Justice Initiative has done us the great of an honor of having you here with us for 3 or 4 years. I mean, we would wish to have you forever. I can't thank you enough because I was not expecting for the documentary to end the way it did. Right, as someone who is also invested in the representational strategies that actually are used to arrest Black women, you know, and especially in terms of beauty and beauty standards, I was anticipating. I think that the conclusion was very anticlimactic. I really appreciate you, directing our attention to this point of reclamation, right? But I also enjoy how you return. The documentary is on France, right? And in the racial imaginary, especially when it comes to beauty, you bring up the Hottentot Venus, Sarah Batman, right? And that is really where Sarah Batman's body was actually dissected, right? So I really like this cyclical, this return to the scene at which Sarah Batman's body, or Sarah Batman's booty, if you will, was dissected. So thank you for the historical connection. I think I'll be interested in understanding or knowing or learning what motivated you to make this film.
Thank you very much, Kwame, for hosting the conversation, and thanks to Georgetown, to Gender Plus Justice Initiative, and to Dr. Hafa for having me. I'm really happy and honored to be part of that community. So I had in mind the documentary for quite some time, and I think the first time I decided to think about that topic was when I heard about some accidents that happened to women who were trying to get surgery for their butts. I read a story about the US, and I thought that, yes, it's also changing in France. I can see on Instagram that, younger generation focus more on the bodies than my generation. So it's interesting because France is a country that really values the fact of being very slim, even if you are over 40, over 50. So it was interesting to see that the younger generations were not valuing thinness in the same way. So I started to think about the documentary in that time and started to speak about it to the producer, Sébastien Follin, who was really interested in that, but we had hard time to find the channel to get it being aired. And 2 years ago, the channel France TV Slash, which is so France TV is kind of the PBS, so it's the public channel. It has several channels, and France TV Slash is the one for the younger audience. So it's only online, and it's aired for 15 to 25 years old. So that's interesting because that's the reason why I included, teenagers and young adults in the conversations, because I wanted to make sure that I was, not too far from their concerns. So that's the idea I had, and the more I was thinking about the topic, the fact that I was seeing some women who were not black making money out of that physiognomy, I really thought it would be interesting to see what was the meaning of that.
I was very fascinated too then by the capitalist, dimensions, and black women actually, utilizing or appropriating their body to make money. I'm actually immediately reminded of Lisa Monet, who really clearly did not give a damn. And somehow I appreciated the kind of freedom. But I was also intrigued by the fact that there are so many paradoxes in the documentary. So on the one hand, I feel that black women in particular have often been marginalized in the beauty imaginary, right? Which is obviously superbly very wide, right? But here we are returning to the very thing that was used to marginalize black women, right? To make ourselves visible. So then by that I mean the very part of the body that was used to invisibilize or make very hyper visible black women are actually being reclaimed. So could you explain a little bit of the paradoxes? Was it an intended, was it intentional on your part to just capitalize on the medium of the documentary to amplify or highlight these paradoxes?
Yes, that was my first question, and I don't think I have an answer. I'm still struggling with it. Like, is it something like the fact that women, and especially black women, are able to reclaim their bodies, even if it doesn't really correspond to the beauty standards? It's good because it's a way to emancipate from a kind of idea of the body that was very, very restrictive, but at the same time reusing the codes of a certain type of femininity is still restrictive. So I'm like, in a certain way, it's a win, but the fact that you can only have big butts on slim bodies is still, a pressure. And that's what Kiemi says. She says, I have, a big butt, but I'm also a fat woman. So nobody will celebrate my body because the big butt is supposed to be on another type of body. So you have to navigate between something that is impossible because you cannot have a big butt and a flat stomach. You know, it happens, but to a very, low number of women. So I'm like, the documentary is not meant to give a straight answer. It's just to present all the options and to make people think about, how to make something out of that, how to be, self-aware and to be self-satisfied and not to feel pressure to follow a trend. And I think that Lisa Monet found her way. She made something out of her own body, which has, her own shape. And she made her career out of that. But she gets many critics in France. There are male rappers who don't want to rap with her, to have her to feature in her songs because of what she does. So she's very interesting because she's kind of unique figure in the rap game in France. But I didn't want to say like the good answer is that you have to act that way or you have to act this way, but to present all that could be chosen as an option.
Yeah, I see that ambivalence. There was definitely that ambivalence on your part, and this actually, the fact that I'm from Ghana, right, and so I come from that part of Africa where historically you eat well, you grow big. That's what makes you a beautiful woman. And so you come to the US and you're having to contend with these conceptions of beauty. And so I was thinking again about a reference to Mapuka, right? And talking. And I had never actually made that connection. And so I think my question here is the fact that I see a lot of cultural migration, right? From especially the US to France and some from Africa. But I wonder if you could speak a little bit about the preponderance, if you will, of American cultural production, especially as filtered through Black cultural production in the US, and what that says about African American cultural hegemony in France.
Yeah, thank you for your question and for your reference of the fact that you are from Ghana. It's very interesting because many people like Joker, the rapper, and like me are French, but we have family in Africa, so we navigate through different systems of beauty standards. For example, for myself, I know that in Senegal, it's the same kind of beauty types. You have to be curvy. And my mother is slim as I am, and ever since I go to Senegal, people are like, why are you never getting weight? Like, what's happening to you? You're the same as when you were a teenager. And when I'm in France, I'm not seen the same way. So I've always been between the two kind of appreciation, feeling too slim in Senegal and feeling in conformity to the beauty standards in France. And I've been raised by a mother who thought that she was too slim, and she was like, when I was a child, she was drinking sugar to get weight in order to fit to the Senegalese beauty criteria. So that's very interesting. And the Mapuka, so there was a trend in the 90s that really made Mapuka migrate from tradition to pop culture. There were a series of videotapes, like from, I don't know, cassettes, that were like kind of, it was pornography. And that's how Mapuka became very popular out of Ivory Coast in the 90s. And it migrated to another kind of, like, I think that's the origins maybe of twerking. And I think that in that time it was banned in many African countries because of the way it was used in the porn industry. So that's interesting to see that things move from Africa to Europe and maybe then to the US, and from Africa to the US, but by a reinterpretation of something that is traditional and non-sexual and that became seen as sexual. And I think that also, yes, there is a strong influence of the hip-hop culture in France, because France is the second country of hip-hop. It has been the second country of hip-hop since the early 80s. Like, it's been embracing hip-hop at a very early stage because there were so many young people who were in need of finding a form of art to tell what they were going through, because France is still the country in Europe where you had the largest amount of black people, of people from North African descent, from Asian descent, even more than in the UK, even if you can't tell if you watch French TV. But it's the case. So it's a place where minorities have really be willing to speak up about their concerns. So that influence is very strong, but it goes not only, like it's a mix between the US and Africa, and it's interesting to see how people make something out of it. But twerk, it's interesting because Maimouna, for example, Maimouna Coulibaly, I think she's originally from Mali, and she really creates the booty therapy out of her own family experience, her own culture. And what's interesting is that she started the booty therapy 20 years ago, and when Miley Cyrus had that performance or non-performance, I don't know, at the MTV at the MTV Music Awards, people requested her, but specifically twerk. Like they came to her to have twerk lessons, and she was like, no, I've been doing that for 10 years. I have nothing to do with twerking, and that was interesting how the perception of her art and of her classes changed because a white woman decided to present the art as her own.
Yeah, I was fascinated by the booty therapy. I think we could use a lot more of that here. But actually, I think my last question until we actually, before we introduce the questions to the audience. So at what point then, because clearly we are still limited by this beauty regime that continues to underappreciate the black female body. And I think here of the Jezebel complex, right, that has historically been used to describe black women who assert, their beauty. I mean, they talk about vixens, and so I guess I'm interested in at what point do black women then embrace their bodies without reproducing, the very things that have been used to, to limit or should I say, incarcerate their conceptions of beauty? Like, how do you navigate that line?
It's very difficult. That's why I interviewed Soraya, who was her agency of Vixens, because it was interesting to me to see a woman in charge. So she's not black, but she's from North African origin, and it's interesting also how in France it's not only about black women, but also about women who are from African origin but not black, so who are also part of that mix and claiming, because you also have in North Africa that value that the valuing of big butts in certain dances that I didn't mention in the film, but I could also speak about Morocco, for example, and other countries. So I think that they can claim that by owning the money they make. To me, like Lisa was definitely speaking about how it could be material, and Soraya having her agency, having women who choose to do that, but being at the same time surgeon, being mothers, being teachers, was a balance. But it's still difficult because at the same time you always wonder how you reproduce a narrative that imprison you in the same perpetuation. So I think that everybody find their way because patriarchy is still operating. So I think that one individual cannot, dismantle patriarchy, but we find our way to challenge it and to face it, and maybe to just make a living and make a place of joy out of the system that is still very oppressive.
Thank you so much. I think we are going to open the podium up to questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Hello. Hi, Rokhaya. It's nice to see you again. Thank you for showing us your film. It was great. I'm going to try to articulate this. I hope that it comes out clearly. Something I noticed in the film was obviously the very different perspectives as they're talking about the booty and dancing and these things. But for example, we saw the Ivory Coast traditional dance, which is, I think, pretty objectively can be like not considered sexual. But then there was like the woman who kept, like the dancer that was shown at all the intervals, and she was also talking about it not being sexual. And I have a hard time, first of all, like she was kind of insisting that it was artistic, which I don't understand why it can't be artistic and sexual at the same time. Like, why is it? It's almost like they're defending it in a way by being like, this is not sexual. And it was the same with the rapper. And I have a hard time, like, understanding how, in the way that she's dancing, in the way that she's dressed, etc., that it's not sexual, and why it has to be either or. And I was wondering what your personal perspective is on that. Thanks.
Thank you. It's a very interesting question also. So, like, I choose to have that woman, Aoki, the dancer, dancing all over the documentary, and there was an evolution between the first, interludes and the last ones. That's interesting because I think that what they were saying by using the word sexual was not only sexual, but trying to fit into the male desire. I think it's more sexual in the heteropatriarchal system. Like, it's not meant to please men. I think that it's the way that they were using sexual. Like, not, I think so. And to me, that was important to remind that many dances were, like even the booty therapy, were made because the hips and the butt is considered in many cultures as the center of emotions. So when you use it, when you dance around it, it's not meant to be sexual. It's something that is liberating, and that's what I wanted to insist on. So I interviewed them, and they said what they said, but to me, I think that they did want to say that it was not meant to be submissive to male desire. And I think that it's the case that, like, Aoki is a classically trained dancer who decided to be, to go on twerking, but she dances many different dances, and I think that she doesn't want to, and she doesn't say that it's bad to be a sex worker, for example, but she says that she's an artist and she's not a sex worker.
Hi, Professor Otu, et bonjour Madame Diallo. Félicitations sur votre film, c'était super. Je voulais demander ma question en français parce que je pense que ça serait plus facile. Alors, est-ce que vous pensez que c'est possible que les femmes non noires peuvent vraiment reclaim ou sentir le pouvoir et la puissance dans leurs fesses quand maintenant c'est vraiment les femmes non noires qui sont célébrées pour avoir des grosses fesses et des grosses poitrines? Je pense que pour les femmes noires, avoir des grosses fesses ou des grosses poitrines, c'est vu comme normal ou ordinaire. Alors, les femmes non noires, comme Kim Kardashian par exemple, c'est plutôt célébré et c'est vu comme exceptionnel. Qu'est-ce que vous pensez de ça? Et vous pouvez répondre en anglais ou en français.
Merci beaucoup pour votre question qui est très intéressante. Thank you very much. It's a very interesting question. I think that there are two questions in your question. So the first one is like about maybe white women who had made their public identity over imitating what they think is a black body, a black female body, and erasing the actual black women and all the suffering that came with that type of body to make money and to make it like trendy without, being part of the struggle, without acknowledging the fact that there were women before them, and without even sharing anything about what they gained on that thing. But the last scene of the documentary with the booty therapy included many types of women, white, black, Asians, because I wanted to understand, to make people understand, and all like cis or trans, it doesn't matter, women. I wanted to make people understand that like that part of your body can be also a source of unlocking. Yeah, it could be a way to unlock yourself, and it doesn't belong to any any race. You can be, because I think that colonialism has made European cultures lose a lot of their traditional dancings. You know, there are many dances, traditional dances that are not part, you know, they do exist in people's minds, but they're not part of the daily life anymore. So reconnecting with something that was maybe ancestral belongs to anyone, and like it's very uncommon to see, for example, men using that part of their body, to see Europeans using that part of their bodies in a manner that is not sexual. So to me, the booty therapy is a way to make human beings, wherever they come, reconnect with that part of their body, and not making it commercial or meant to be, you know, visible, to be beautiful. Just to whatever your shape is, just reconnect with your body and find a way to bring joy to yourself.
Rokhaya, well, thank you very much for a wonderful documentary. And I just wanted your thoughts about the following. Do you think that the booty therapy can become commercialized, can become commodified if it spreads to different countries, different cultures, that it can go the way of Kim Kardashian?
Thank you, Marilyn, for the great question. I hope that Kim Kardashian will never hear about the booty therapy because she will trademark it as soon as she hears about it. So I really hope that, yeah, definitely. We've seen that in yoga, for example. We were speaking with my friend Melissa yesterday about yoga, like how it was a spiritual, you know, form of expression, and it's been trademarked by people who had nothing to do with India as something that is meant as a gym thing. It's not something to, you know, it's not to be fit. It's to connect with the spirituality, with your body. So we can see that being commercialized very quickly, and I really hope it will not happen to Maimuna. And if it happens, if it's, you know, reproduced in some other places, I hope that she will be in charge.
Hello, thank you both for your presentation and your conversations. I also, you know, have the same sentiments. I'm originally from Benin. When I go back home, they ask me, do they not feed you in that country, all the money? But my question follows sort of the first sort of topics you both were discussing on, you know, who or where does the onus lie on, you know, expressing to the rest of the world or to the public that, you know, Black women reclaiming their bodies is for them. You know, I've been in my Black body my whole life and in different parts of the country and the world, and that has meant very different things. I spent a significant amount of time studying and interning in the Middle East, and I found myself basically like fighting for my life every day in terms of like having to explain to people that, you know, I'm not here like as just a Black body, you know, I'm here studying, I'm working, and it's always a shock because it's like, but you're just like this Black body. Like that's it. So, you know, I just wanted to ask, obviously, like you said, there is no straight answer for any of these, but sort of, you know, who is responsible in a sort of rhetorical way of, you know, expressing that, you know, if I want to, you know, just have, you know, being in this body, having a big butt is not for you, it is for me, and, you know, that does not signal, or because, you know, I hear comments about, well, like, I see the videos and this is what Black women do, and it's like, no, I'm here to like stay up all night and write papers. So, you know, just sort of how do these conversations happen? How could they happen? Obviously, it's very obvious that, you know, like mentioned in the documentary, not all Black women have butts. I can't even do half of the things they were doing in there, but there's a lot of assumptions that I can. And it is made for some very difficult times and some very interesting conversations. And it's just like, you know, how do we, I don't know, but you get what I'm trying to ask. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your experience. Your comment is really, really, really important. I'm not sure I have an answer, but it's about how Black bodies have been commodified and like how so many people think that can be accessible. We can speak about, you know, butts, but also the hair. Like people who touch your hair for no reason and think that, you know, it's acceptable. It's like, yeah, your body no longer belongs to you, and some people would think that they are allowed to just experience the feeling of touching a Black body because they've never seen one too close. So I'm not sure I have an answer, but of course it's a big deal, and it's something that we need to work on, because it has to do with the dehumanization. The same story that Sarah Baartman experienced as a young woman in the early 19th century. She was exposed to atrocious sexual and many forms of brutality. So we live through the legacy of that commodification of black bodies, and we are trying to do our best to be, the human beings that we should be, but it's, an ongoing process. And I'm not sure we can answer to the question today, but the fact of having the discussion, opening maybe rooms to discuss it, your experience in Middle East is very interesting for me to hear, because I don't go there quite often. So maybe sharing those type of experience also help us understanding those dynamics better.
Thank you also for the movie and the smart thoughts after it. I have a question on the role of capitalism in this whole reclaiming your body movement, and we touched upon it on the question on yoga and this therapy, booty therapy workshops. So, in the movie it was very open, but I would like to know, what do you think, can we really reclaim our bodies if there's still an industry making money out of it, and what is the role of capitalism in this whole scene?
That's a whole conference that we have here. Yes, that's you have your ideas and you have to navigate through the world as it is. So of course we don't have to to be part of a class to reclaim our bodies. Like, you can go to a class, but you can also ask your mother, your parents, your grandparents, how, about their own traditions, if they know them. Like, there are so many different paths. Some people need to have instructors and to pay and to go to classes, and some don't. So I think that, according to who you are, you find, the way that is the best for you. And maybe you need guidance first, and now you have some keys, you can, be your own, instructor and find your own way. But it's very difficult because, nowadays when you need something, you just pay if you can, and you go to, an online class or, in-person class, and you try to get things that help you. So I'm not sure.
Hello? Oh, okay. Sorry. Hello, thank you so much. My question is kind of more of a existential, personal nature of, we're in a period of body positivity and kind of empowerment of women's bodies, and at the same time a hypersexualization of these same features. And I think it's very easy for an individual to feel to think they're empowered, but really they're subscribing to kind of heteropatriarchal values. So how does one feel empowered in their body without falling into hypersexualizing themselves and valuing themselves because they are receiving this kind of external praise within a kind of heteropatriarchal context? And then conversely, how does one navigate perhaps that external validation going away? I think we see right now, the Kim K big booty trend is going away. The Kardashians are getting their butt implants removed, and there's kind of this skinny is back kind of rhetoric coming around. And so how does one maintain that level of self-love and empowerment when the external validation is very changing?
Yes, that's very difficult. The thing is that as long as you rely on external validation, you will be disappointed at some point, because your body type can be trendy once and then not anymore. So if you just depend on that, you cannot be happy your whole life, because it changes all the time. And at the same time, as human beings, we need recognition. It's something that is part of our way of socializing. So I was very interested in what Sophie Cheval, the therapist, said. Is that at some point we forget that our body is not meant to be beautiful and to be seen. It's meant to function and to carry our brain and You know, you see. So like, maybe thinking about the purpose of our body is a key to just not forget that it's not like, it's not meant to be beautiful or beautiful to us, but that's not its first purpose. It has to function and to help us, you know, going throughout our life, and that's the first reason why it's here.
Hi, okay. So first, congratulations, Rokhaya, for the documentary. I'm a bit frustrated because I think it's too short. It must be a bit longer because as an African woman who grew up in France and also is now in the US, I feel like the question of the booty is really different from where you are, located, where you are from. Because I feel like in the documentary, one of the young girl, the one she was African, she said that she doesn't have any problem with her body because she grew up in Africa. And that is a whole, maybe a whole part of a documentary, like how that conversation moved from Africa to Europe. Because even in, I think in the 70s, when you take somebody like Chalamwana, who was from Congo, and the way she was dancing and showcasing her body, it was kind of, let's say, beauty, positivity, and everything. But and now, like, maybe those girls who are like the vixen, if they look at Shalamwana, they will see that like it kind of has been like, oh, maybe that's not what we wanted, because maybe she's still under a lot of patriarchy. But my question, because I have a lot of questions, but I will just stick to one. My question is, I think it was also asked in the documentary about why, or maybe how this question can be moved to, let's say, the high classes, because for me it's also a classist question. Because when we talk about all those women without beauty and everything, like Meghan Markle, she doesn't have a beauty positivity. And even a rapper like EVE is questioning a lot, because as soon as she get married to her husband, her billionaire husband from London, she changed the way she was even showing her body. So is it a choice for you to not having people from the high classes and all those high value men to talk about what they want? That was why are they not in the documentary?
Thank you for your question. I wish I could have more time, but I couldn't, because it's the format of the platform is 40 minutes, so I couldn't spend much more time. And at the very beginning, I really wanted to go to Africa to film and to interview people, but because of the budget, I couldn't. So I wanted to go to Brazil, I wanted to go to Africa, but the budget was, you know, it's the online platform, so we couldn't just cover the ideas that I had. So I had to focus at some point and to pick the topics that I wanted to tell about. But of course, the issue of that is addressed a little bit by Kiemis is obvious. Like if you see, you know, in France, for example, you know, high, you know, intellectuals, women intellectuals, or women from those high classes, they would never subscribe to that kind of body positivity. It really belongs to a certain type of class, something that would be, you know, a film by itself. So it's not really my choice. It's something that I had to deal with, and I had to cut the documentary to what could fit into the 40 minutes.
Hello? Okay. First of all, this was a great documentary. This is probably the second one that I've seen of yours, so thank you for putting this composition together. I guess I have a sort of a mixture of a statement and a question. So I know that the documentary and part of the work that you do is focused on women particularly. And it's funny, while I was watching this, I was also thinking about how men sexualize themselves through dance. I was even thinking like Elvis. When he first came out, he was accused of appropriating the body movements of Black entertainers, and how Black entertainers like James Brown and again Elvis and even Michael Jackson were scrutinized for the way that they would move. I go back and I think about Congolese men when I watch them dancing, and there's a lot of vibrations of the hips. And so my question is, in what context are men judged for the way that they express themselves you can say it's freedom or sexually. In what context are men judged for that kind of expression versus how you observe that women are judged for that same sort of expression?
Yeah.
I was about to say that Kwame should answer to this one.
No,
Yeah.
I think that is a very, I think, you know, it depends on context matters, right? In places like, for my African comrades in the house, I know that, I mean, I'm coming from Ghana where men dance. Like dance is something we do, the gyration of the hips is very common. And so my observation is that in that context, even the way you dance can actually somehow give you the reputation of, you know, being something else in the privacy of your whatever, right? But I think in this context, there's actually some form of racialized patriarchy, and the fact that I've been in the US for a while, and I'm interested in the ways in which, well, as a gay man, when I go out to places to dance, right, you know, there is something about dancing that actually marks you as a gay person or as queer, right? So the freedom to let the body be. And I feel this particularly with black men, right? And I also understand that this is a historical context, that the black men in the US are actually the product of this particular convoluted history that has actually long emasculated black men here in ways that are quite different from what I'm familiar with back home in Ghana, right? Where, of course, we experience colonization, but then in a way, you know, the kind of interactions we had with white colonials were quite different, right? So this context, I'm seeing that, but what I'm also seeing is a shift, quite frankly, of this context to Ghana, a context that, and like we see in France, right, like that I'm seeing Ghanaian men in particular becoming less and less invested in dancing, right? And this becomes very palpable or manifest in, you know, Ghanaian men no longer dance together. We used to dance together. But, you know, that homosocial form of intimacy is now rebranded as gay, right? And that actually has also, unfortunately, the shift has coincided with the increased visibility of LGBT issues in Ghana, where, you know, to be two men dancing together is going to be read as you being gay, right? So I think in the African context, it's less an issue. It's less of a non-issue in Ghana in particular, because we have Pan Logo, we have it in South Africa where men dance, but it's a particular Western kind of fear of men, you know, unable to free themselves to make their waist or hips, you know, let themselves be, right? I mean, that's my response to that, yeah.
Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. My question is, I think, a continuation of yours in terms of, as a queer person experiencing this film, as a queer woman, I wonder if people who aren't attracted to men, right, who have no desire to attract the male gaze, if we're truly free from that, obviously the context and the limitations of living in a heteropatriarchal society, but I wonder what your, you know, perspective is on, you know, attracting the female gaze, attracting the male gaze, if there is a difference in that. So I'd love to hear sort of your thoughts on that.
Do you want to answer also? Yeah. I can just shortly. I just want to repeat what Sophie Chauvin, the therapist, said. That in lesbian communities, the studies showed that they were less subject to that kind of pressure around bodies than in heterosexual communities. So I guess that you're not totally away from the male gaze and the patriarchy, but it doesn't matter the same way, I think so.
Yeah, I think I would echo that, and I think, the patriarchal, heteropatriarchal gaze is a very universal gaze. So we are actually operating within that gaze to begin with. And, I guess some of the ways in which we can actually, it's not a gaze we can absorb or extricate ourselves from. To even make that admission or submission would be to lie to yourself, right? That somehow, even in our own retrieval of, or trying to make our own gazes independent, we are still reproducing that gaze. So I guess for many minoritized subjects that, you know, the issue is we disidentify, right? And it's a slow process, but you know, I think it would be a lie to imagine that you are actually not operating within the gaze. You can actually modulate, manage, right? But to go back to the somebody's question on capitalism, it's like capitalism. Can we completely leave capitalism behind, right? In trying to reclaim, right, this subjectivity that has historically been, you know, exploited by capital, right? It's really, so it's part of the navigation. And I think that is what you're actually trying to get at in the documentary. And you're actually doing it very well, actually, yeah.
Hello, thank you for sharing this amazing documentary. I kind of wanted to add some some experience background, as well as ask you a follow-up question. But I'm actually a professional dancer. I've switched careers now, I'm here at Georgetown, but I grew up training classically in particularly ballet, pointe, jazz, those kinds of styles, and then later transitioned to more commercial styles, which you see now, like hip-hop dance, heels dance, twerking, all that. And I was very fascinated by the inclusion of Josephine Baker, and just the perspective of dance as it plays to how we view the female body. I actually studied dance and cultural history in undergrad, and a lot of what we talked about is how ballet actually kind of solidified these concepts of how a woman is viewed and what is worth viewing and what is not worth viewing. And I feel like that conversation came to the forefront more when Misty Copeland kind of came onto the scene. And you know, she was, I would say she's still fairly thin for a black female, but she was criticized for even just like the muscular tone of her body. And then to kind of play on what you were talking about in terms of just how it plays with males, and even males in the ballet world. Like when I was growing up doing ballet, we were always told, you know, tuck your bum, like try not to accentuate. I also went to Dance Suite of Harlem, so like there's this idea of like slimming your backside so it doesn't pronounce itself so much, but yet it's celebrated for the male dancer. You want to have a strong buttocks, you want to show like the definition of your legs. So it's, I feel you touched on it in there, but I was interested in like the paradox of how it's viewed for a male versus a female when the same muscle groups are still being used, you know? So my question in turn is, through your experience filming the documentary and maybe just interviews you've had, was there a discussion or conversation more into like how dance across different genres influence or shape the way people view female bums?
Thank you. It's a great for sharing your experience. It's amazing to hear you, and it's a great comment and question. So it was not specifically part of that documentary, but I've had some conversations or interview about how the way bodies are displayed in dance is reinforcing the role of the genders, like the gender roles, and yeah, that's really interesting to see how like female dancing is supposed to display femininity, so it's not too muscular, it's you know more curvy, more round, and you know, male dancing is supposed to display strength. So it's very interesting, and I think it could be a documentary on its own. Like, that's so interesting. And the Josephine Baker part is also, I couldn't dig more into it, but it's also very interesting because she was made famous in 1925, because she danced half naked with the banana belt. And at that time, it was not possible for white women to dance in the same way. And what's interesting is that first, when she was required to dance that way, she was shocked, and she wanted to go back to the US. She cried, she was only 19, and she wanted to go back to her country. And so she decided to embrace that kind of dance by acting like in a clownish way to just discharge the erotic, part of the dancing. So that's also interesting to see how, as a black woman, she was required to be very sexy, and she decided to make it more fun.
Yeah, your question is very, I like the paradox, and I think, ballet has historically or traditionally been for or construed as a wide bodies, like it's a wide performance or performative activity. And I can really sense the ways in which, and in terms of gender, I think we enter, race complicates how we experience gender. Does that make sense? And in the context of ballet, of course, you are talking about the ways in which women were told not to masculinize themselves, right? It's because of the way ballet is also construed, right? But like for black women, for you in that particular field, that the issue is much more accentuated because you are a black woman who lives in a very racist society that masculinizes the black female body, right? So the pressure is on you to iron your body to conform with, right, the image of the perfect ballet body, which is the white woman's body, right? And I'm really trying to sit with why the men are required to have protuberant buttocks, right? And how that actually further emphasizes the paradox, right? So what's going on there with gender? Why is there this kind of undermining gender, right? When, why is it okay for the man to have a big buttocks in that space and not? And I think that's something I'm sitting with. So I'd like to talk to you more about that, yeah.
Hello, I have a question for you guys. First and foremost, I really enjoyed the film. As a Cameroonian person as well, I love the fact that you guys kind of highlighted that African experience. So while I was watching the film, I was kind of reminded of another French film that kind of explores sexuality and twerking, specifically Mamouna Ducouray's Cuties, particularly because the subject matter that film kind of explored sexuality as it involves like children. Did you, while choosing the subjects that you were interviewing for this film, like kind of consider age because the subject was sexuality?
Thank you, that's very interesting. Maimouna Doucouré is a good friend of mine, and I remember the controversy over her film because of like the trailer that was very oriented, she was put into a controversy that had nothing to do with the actual film. So yeah, my purpose was not to, I tackle a little bit the hypersexualization of black women where there are children. Anissa, the young woman, tells about how when she was a child, she was very sexualized, even if she didn't know anything about sex, because she was black, because she was curvy. So I really tackled that a little bit, but that was not really the purpose of the documentary, to focus on how that, hypersexualization, evaluation of sexualized body could affect children who would imitate that without even knowing what it means. But the film Cuties Mignonne was really interesting on that way.
Sorry. Thank you very much for this film. It's such a great opportunity to be able to have a discussion with you. I have two things to say. First, something I was thinking about watching Bootyful, and then a question for you. I really like the notion of paradox and ambiguity that we were talking about at the very beginning of this discussion. So I'm studying Francophone literature at UMD on post-colonial studies, and I'm studying South Pacific, and especially French Polynesia. And it strikes me how there is a lot of similarities in this topic, because in French Polynesia there is a dance called tamouré, where the woman is really in the center of the dance, even if men are also dancing it. And Polynesian women, especially indigenous women after the colonization, were victim of this Vainé myth. And it's quite interesting to see that in the literature produced by indigenous women in French Polynesia, there is still this struggle of avoiding the myth and trying to just escape from it, even if there are strong women, and Polynesian literature is, firstly the matter of women. There is still this body around that you cannot really completely escape all the time. So this is what I was thinking watching Bootyful. And my question is also about paradox, because your film is mainly about the fact that women, especially black women, need to reclaim their body and to free themselves. So in the world we are living in, how can we think this paradox where women's rights right now are such a fragile thing? So how can we think freedom but at the same time this prison we're in?
That's a big question. Thank you so much. And regarding the French Polynesia, it's also interesting to connect your question to the former one with the hypersexualization of young women by artists like Gauguin. It's also very interesting to see how French men who went to territories that were colonized decided to abuse young women, teenagers, and to say it's local culture, so I'm allowed to do that, and we're celebrated for that. When the film, the biopic about Gauguin was released, I think it was 2 years ago, and it was the main character was interpreted by Vincent Cassel. There was the controversy. People said, no, it's their culture. It was okay at that time because it was in Polynesia. And there is also this idea that certain bodies don't really deserve, respect or, protection. So that's my first comment on what you said. And I don't know the rest of the question. I really don't know. I think that you can do all in the same time. But yes, you're constantly navigating between, the fact that you're facing a deprivation of your rights, and at the same time you need to live your life and to be part of the world. So it's something that is constant for not only for women, actually, for all people who are marginalized, LGBTQ people, negatively racialized people. It's something that you are going back and forth to all the time and constantly.
Hi, can you hear me okay? Yeah? Okay, cool. I really enjoyed the film, and I really valued how you said at the end, like when you first started talking, and even with the ending of the film, that you weren't really pushing an answer, that you don't even have all the answers, that the documentary served to show different perspectives. So I guess off of that line of thought, I know as a journalist, you were also like cultivating perspectives from people you interviewed, and you talk about the therapist a lot. So I was wondering, in your talking and our conversation, I noticed that you highlighted a paradox that exists where on one hand, where the goal is to like divest and not rely on social expectations, and what you said specifically, sorry, I wrote it down. Oh yeah, seeking external validation, but at the same time, you also acknowledge that we receive like we're socialized to like value that recognition. And I think what was interesting about what the therapist said about being like that body neutrality perspective and like divesting from seeing our bodies as like beautiful or like seeking value in that way, was thinking about like even us in the space, we just only like we end up seeking value and validation in other ways. So we seek validation because we're adjacent to institutions or the accolades we have or our achievements. So even if we're not seeking it from our body, we seek it from elsewhere. So I wonder, like, at least from what you think the therapist would say, how do you think she would engage with the paradox that exists, where if we're not seeking validation from our bodies, or we're like shifting to be more neutral
we seek validation elsewhere? Is there a true divestment that's possible? What do you think she'd argue?
Thank you. It's a great question. So I'm not a therapist, of course, but I think that the main question is, how does it make you feel? And what does it cost you mentally? Like, I think it's the main question, like, because at some point, as you said, we're socially connected and we rely on, appreciation, validation, I don't know. But what are you ready to do in order to be validated, to be accepted? And how costly is it to yourself? I think that's the balance that we need to find. Hi.
Sorry, I don't know. I really enjoyed the documentary. So my question is, the end of the documentary mostly focused on empowerment through self-acceptance and kind of the embracement of one's own body. In your opinion, can plastic surgery be empowering, especially since it is altering one's body and is mostly done to ascribe to certain beauty standards?
Thank you. It's a great question. It's so complicated. Like, there are many reasons for having plastic surgery. It can be to repair, it can be to transform, it can be to fit certain, certain standards. For example, in France, I don't know how it is here, but you have certain kind of plastic surgery that are taken care of by the Social Security because it's considered, and so we know what the criteria is. So at some point, the state considers that it should be supported by the collective solidarity. So I think it can be both. Like it's still the same kind of question. What kind of risk are you ready to take for what outcome? You see, so I think that we should be able to do whatever we want with our bodies, but the question is how dangerous it can be and what's the reason for incurring so much danger. But I won't judge anyone going to plastic surgery because we have so many reasons for that. So that's my answer. Thank you. And thank you for your comments on the film.
So, good evening. Thank you very much as well, Rokhaya and Kwame, for the presentation. So first of all, I would like to echo what Linda said earlier about, not frustrated, but it is true that it was kind of short. And for such ambitious and very relevant, conversation, I think it should have been a bit a longer, kind of documentary. But I do understand what you talk about in terms of production. And actually, that's where my question is coming. I'm wondering, I'm curious about the inception of the project. When you went to kind of pitch the idea of the project, how did it go? Because I'm surprised that, such a powerful, conversation wasn't more embraced by the TV, the production, because I see where you landed in the rather tiny piece of, France Télévisions. So what do you think it tells us? Is it like, this conversation is still a bit taboo, or there's like, a discomfort, around, questions of the female body, if I may say?
You know what? It's very funny because last week or 2 weeks ago, I was watching France 5, which is part of the France Télévisions, so the public service, the PBS, the French PBS. And so France 5 is way bigger than France TV/, which had my documentary. And I saw a documentary about booties that was made by a white person. And it was like, it was much more about Brigitte Bardot and Truffaut, and not really challenging, like, it was not really political. And I think it was based on a book that was authored 10 years ago, so I have to give credit on that book. But I was like, you could have gave me the money, I would have, I was shocked. Like just 1 year after mine, you have that documentary that is, like there were only white people in the documentary, no person of color. I was shocked, I was really shocked. There was no question about the racialization of booties. There was some like the persons of color who were in the documentary were Cardi B and Nicki Minaj, but just as appearing in archives, but no one was interviewed about that. and it's still, I think it's still online. It's like La Singulière or La Fabuleuse Histoire des Fesses or something like that. But I'm sure that the fact that I made my documentary unlocked something and made other people, but it happens to me all the time. Like I make a documentary for a small channel and then you see another documentary about the same topic by a white person in a big channel. It happens to me all the time.
Okay. Hi, thank you so much for the presentation. I really love the documentary. But I guess my question was, so I don't remember his name, but the male rapper that you had interviewed, his thing was about presenting a message that wasn't sexualizing twerking. But then I also found it really funny how after he said that, the frame that you showed was from his music video, sexualizing gay women. So I just wanted to know, was that done intentionally? And do you think that that takes away from his message? Just because I feel like a lot of times when people do talk about the hypersexualization of Black women, they don't tend to at least look at how that may affect queer women as well. So yeah.
So his name is Joker, his stage name. Yeah, I wanted to have his analysis on his work and people to be able to make their own, have their own opinions. So I was not there to judge, just to display what he thought about what he did and what he was actually doing. But what was also interesting is that he was saying that he had so many, hits, and people were only focusing on the few that were about sex or booties or so. But to me, it's up to you to, to analyze the clips in the way you want to. And it was the same when I interviewed Magali Berda, who is the head of the agency of influencers. That you can just tell by seeing the women that some of the women that she represents, then still it's also part of their capital to modify their body. To me, it's part of the capital. She says that you cannot just change your body and make money, but I think that still it's some of them would never have been so popular if it wasn't for changing their bodies. They do have other qualities, but changing their bodies was part of their strategy and their career strategy.
Everyone, I think we're done here. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Rokhaya.
Thank you
very much.
Professor Otu.
Thank you.
We have more programs next week, so please check our website. We have another screening about an amazing group of women who were providing abortions about 50, 60 years ago called the Janes. So I'll welcome you to that next Wednesday. And we have way more program for the rest of the semester. Thank you all of you for being with us tonight.